Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 10th episode of the Multifamily Methods Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, James Gleason, and I'm going to get into today how I bought my first properties, some of the strategies that I used in growing my portfolio early in the business. I talk a lot about what I do now, sort of how I've shifted my mindset and my approach and my philosophy as a real estate investor. But not everyone knows my story in the beginning and the things that I was going through as I was building the portfolio. People mostly see the social media posts, the success that I'm having today, but not everyone knows the grit and the hardship that I went through in the beginning as a real estate investor. I do my best to talk about the difficulties of real estate. I do my best to talk about the strategies that I've utilized. Those who know me personally know the struggle that I went through in the beginning. So I want to get in that today. So my story really all started when I was 21 years old. I was an intern for John Deere in Waterloo, Iowa. And during my internship in Waterloo, Iowa, I became increasingly disappointed in my career as an engineer. I Googled when I was in high school what degree as an undergrad would make the most money, and engineering continued to come up. My parents wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that because they cared about me. They wanted me to have a good career, and I didn't want to be a doctor or a lawyer, and I was good at math. So I decided to go the engineering route. And, I quickly found out that I did not enjoy it. My freshman year internship as an engineer, it was my first job. It didn't really hit me that this isn't something that I genuinely enjoy. I was happy to honestly have an internship as a freshman. As a sophomore, I was really into partying. I was really distracted by a lot of different things. But that sophomore summer is really when I started to feel a sense of emptiness because that was really my first summer and the first event in my life without basketball. I had my whole freshman year as a college basketball athlete. So that summer was finally the first time in my life that I didn't have basketball and I didn't have this big goal to go professional ball. And so I felt very empty that summer, but I had a pretty cool internship. I mean, I had a company truck, I was traveling, I went to a NBA finals game. It was pretty cool. I guess that distracted me from it. My friends thought it was cool. So, whatever. I went through that summer, but that's really when I really first realized wow, this might not be for me. And then, went through that year, my sophomore year, and then came, my junior year internship for John Deere in Iowa. And that's when it was really man, I really don't like this. I don't think I can do this for the rest of my life. And, I discovered real estate. I've kind of explained how I discovered it, the obsession that I had immediately. But I found every day that I was in the office, I was reading, listening to podcasts, and doing real estate investing instead of doing the actual job as an engineer. And every review that I got as an intern was always not bad, not excellent, just good. Just good enough, right, to not fire this person. And so I wasn't excelling at my jobs by any stretch of the imagination. But I loved real estate. I immediately had a fascination. I immediately had an obsession. And this was the first time in, over a year that I finally found some purpose in my life after giving up basketball. And so how did I buy my first deal? Well, my first official deal was January of 2018 when I bought a single family house. But before that deal, I actually bought a mobile home while I was in Iowa. And this was technically my first deal. I don't really count it because it wasn't a house, but it was my first investment in something. Was that summer when I was in Iowa, and there was a gentleman who I met on Bigger Pockets. He met with me for coffee, and he kind of took me under his wings. He was willing to meet with me, willing to answer questions for me. When you're first getting into anything, but definitely in real estate, you have so many questions. There's all these possibilities, but you just don't understand how to get to the level that you want to get to. It all sounds super exciting, but how do I actually underwrite deals? How do I actually find deals? How do I get the money for the deals? So all of this is foreign to me. I meet with this guy for coffee, and I'm asking questions. And so that really gave me the motivation of, I'm not a nobody in this business. Someone's willing to meet with me, who has some credentials. And I don't know if he had an ulterior motive, or if he was just a genuinely nice guy who was trying to help me out, or both could be true at the same time. But he was willing to meet with me, and I continued to network on Bigger Pockets. And then I had someone reach out to me, who was a property manager for mobile homes. And so he reached out to me and said, hey, James, I saw your post about wanting to invest in your first deal. Why don't you meet with me at my office? I might have something for you. And so he sat me down and he asked me if I would be interested in investing in a mobile home. So not a mobile home park, which is a fantastic investment, but just a mobile home. Which, by the way, kind of a side comment, if you're thinking about investing in a mobile home, I don't recommend it. Mobile homes depreciate. The the class of tenant is not very high. They're going to destroy your mobile home. A lot of times in real estate, if you have an asset that isn't cash flowing, it still might make sense with the appreciation and the principal pay down that you're going to get. But with mobile homes, you don't get appreciation. So if you're breaking even with this cash flow, it really doesn't make sense. And then on top of that, you have lot rent. So I was paying something like $300 a month in lot rent. And so between that and the maintenance costs, I really wasn't cash flowing, even though on paper I was supposed to be cash flowing all this money. I really wasn't cash flowing. The asset was depreciating. And so I ultimately sold that asset. But this guy sat me down, and looking back, he wanted me to buy a mobile home so that I would hire him as the property manager, and he could grow his business, which I'm very grateful for him for reaching out to me and sitting me down to do that. So I ended up buying my first mobile home for $5,000. I put about another $5,000 into it in work. This gentleman helped me, walked me through that process. So I was all into this mobile home for $10,000, and that was technically my first investment. With the same gentleman, him and his partner seller financed me 2 other mobile homes that took me like 1 or 2 years to eventually pay off. Those weren't cash flowing. I ultimately sold these mobile homes, 4 years into the business. Once I started buying, a bunch of single families, apartments, duplexes, and just really discovered that it wasn't worth it. But those first mobile homes really gave me the motivation, and it felt really just real. I was like, man, all these podcasts that I'm reading about, or all these podcasts that I'm listening to, all these books that I'm reading about successful real estate investors, I can do this. And so that gave me the motivation that I needed. But fast forward, I ended up January of 2018, I purchased my first single family home. This house is in Breckenridge Hills, 3032 West Tennyson Avenue. You could look it up. I found this deal on Craigslist. So I haven't been on Craigslist in years, but back in the day in 2018, using Craigslist was an effective strategy for finding real estate deals. And so I found this deal on Craigslist. And I'm not actually sure if it was also listed on the market, because I didn't even know how to look on the market back then. But I got in touch with the agent, and ended up purchasing this deal for $25,000. I'm trying to remember. Okay, so the property manager is who I met next. So I just Googled property managers near me. I found a local property manager who, bless their heart, they were willing to walk this deal with me, give me pointers, tell me things to look out for. And that really gave me the confidence to move forward with this deal, because if I didn't have them, I didn't know anything about construction costs and rehab estimates and any of those things. And so it's really because of these property managers that I had the confidence to ultimately move forward. And then these property managers, I told them I need a lender to be able to buy this deal. They actually referred me to my first private money lender. And that private money lender is the one who funded my first deal. Now, his terms were 15% and 5 points up front. So I didn't recognize how much of a ripoff that was and how much I was paying for this first deal. I have no regrets, though. I mean, this guy ended up funding my first, 4 deals. And it's funny because for this first one, he was very hesitant. I was 21 years old, didn't have a job, credit wasn't good, didn't have saving. I had a little savings, I guess, for a 21-year-old, less than 10 grand. Nothing, no money, right? So I really didn't have the credentials that even me with a lending company today that I would want to see someone else have. I didn't have those. But we had a lot of phone calls. I really reassured him that this was my passion. I wanted to give this my absolute all, and that he could trust me ultimately at the end of the day, right? So then, I get into my senior year, and I had purchased some real estate at that point, and college was never the same for me after that. Once I learned how to invest in real estate, I didn't even want to graduate my engineering degree. I really just wanted to do real estate, drop out of college, and just like pursue my dreams. But engineering was no joke. It was very difficult for me. Rollo is extremely difficult. And so being 75% of the way done, I just couldn't justify dropping out. If I was a freshman at that point, I could almost say with 100%, 99.9% certainty that I probably would have dropped out. But being it was my senior year, I was like, what the heck, one more year. So I did it. I graduated, and I'm so glad I graduated because going all in on real estate with no income, no savings, I don't recommend doing that. I don't think it's a good idea. And my engineering job gave me a good income. I made 6 figures as an engineer, which, when you're in your 20s, that's good money. And so I was making decent money as an engineer. And that income is ultimately what helped me build my real estate portfolio. There's a show called Undercover Billionaire. Grant Cardone's been on there. And they put these successful entrepreneurs, they change their hairdo, shave their head, give them glasses or whatever. So they're undercover. They take away all their resources, give them a cell phone, and then, I think they give them a car and then like $100 or something like that. And within 90 days, they have to create $1 million in cash or a value or of net worth. And I remember the first season of Undercover Billionaire, I'll never forget, the gentleman said, I need to figure out food and shelter first, because if I'm trying to create the $1 million first, I'm going to be in fight or flight mode all the time, thinking about how I'm going to eat or how I'm going to provide shelter, and therefore I'm not going to be able to use my creative energy to go and make $1 million. So the first things first, I need to figure out food and shelter. And that, for some reason, always clicked with me. And so having that engineering job, I didn't have to worry about food and shelter. My bills were taken care of, And so all of my other energy I could focus on real estate investing. And, if I would have done it the other way around, where I just went all in on real estate, I don't know that I would have made it, because I would have been desperate to do deals, or I probably would have made rash decisions that didn't make sense in desperation because I couldn't pay my bills. So that engineering job really gave me a foundation in that I didn't need a deal to survive. I really just wanted these deals to grow the portfolio. And so, that senior year of college, I was doing real estate the entire time. I've always been good at collaborating with people. I've always been good at sales. I think that served me a lot. But I was able to get together with a lot of my buddies in college and actually write promissory notes with them. And so they would give me, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000. I had multiple people give me thousands of dollars as college students, which is like all of their savings, because they trusted me. And because, I was able to communicate with them, hey, I'm going to do whatever is necessary to make sure that you get this money back. And so even with very low savings, no job, I was able to raise money from my fraternity buddies and other buddies in college to then invest that money into real estate. And so, my ability to persuade and make people feel comfortable, I think helped me a lot. My ability to sell, but also my ability to deliver on my promises. Because the first guy that gave me money, when I gave him that return, everyone else saw that. It's a small university, and it's an even smaller fraternity. So I returned money to the one guy. Everyone else wanted to be a part of this, and the rest was history. So I was able to raise, I don't know, a few five figures from friends, and that really helped me accelerate my real estate journey. But stuck with my engineering job, bought my first 4 deals or so with the same hard money lender. That hard money lender referred me to his contractor. So it's like one relationship led to another type of thing. And I felt invincible. I remember distinctly, I was in a library. I lived in the library, by the way. When I was on this real estate journey, I was reading 2 books a week, a podcast a day. I was a reading machine, which is crazy because I never really enjoyed reading until I got into real estate, and then I fell in love with it. So I was waking up, going to the library, going to bed for like my entire senior year, just reading investment books, business books, real estate books. That's when I got the majority of my knowledge, is when I had this reading obsession. If you're listening to this and you don't read, by the way, I would start tomorrow. I know it's hard. As I've gotten older, got a wife and a son and multiple businesses, it has become increasingly harder to consistently read. I still do my best at that. But when I was growing, I was a reading machine, and it changed my life. So reading books will change your life. You should do it. You should make the time. It's 100% worth it. Same with podcasts. I mean, at the very least, take in as much information as you can from videos and podcasts. I mean, that's better than nothing. There's something about reading, though, that you just comprehend it and internalize it differently. I would just binge drink coffee and just read books all day, and I learned so much. It's crazy. And that habit stuck with me for many, many years. I was just reading like crazy. But I felt invincible. I bought all these deals, and eventually it got to a point where I had multiple hard money loans, not a lot of savings, and it became very stressful. I mean, I had these monthly liabilities with not enough money coming in. And that's when it really shifted. And I think that's the stage that a lot of people are in when they get into real estate, is if you want to grow aggressively. Now, granted, I didn't have to grow this aggressively. If you're someone who just wants a good side hustle, real estate investing is the best side hustle in existence. I mean, if you want to buy one house a year, two houses a year, I mean, it can still drastically change your life. It can create a better retirement for you than any IRA, 401k. The compounding effects of real estate, especially today with as much inflation as we have. I mean, real estate can absolutely change your life, even if you don't do it like at a crazy scale. If you just buy a house a year, which is very doable, by the way, for anyone listening to this. If you're listening to this and you're like, oh, James, good for you. You can buy a house a year. Like, anyone can buy a house a year if you know what you're doing. I'm hoping that this podcast teaches people how to do that. So how did I buy that first house? I used a hard money lender. I did the Burr method. I used a hard money lender. He funded 100% of the purchase and the rehab. Purchase was $25,000. Rehab was $14,000. I was all in for $39,000. It appraised for something like $60,000 to $65,000. So traditional Burr deal. That deal today is worth $170,000 ish. It's a 3-bed, 2-bath in Breckenridge Hills, and the rest was history. So anyone could have done that. That same lender kept funding deals for me. Roughly a year later, I bought my first apartment complex. I bought a 17-unit. I bought that with someone's IRA, and he funded 100% of the purchase and the rehab. The purchase was $325,000, which is unbelievable. That deal was an absolute disaster. I've talked about that in previous episodes and on my social media. But when my liabilities were higher than the amount of monthly income that I was bringing in, that's when the stress of real estate really started. And that's where a lot of people are today. So first of all, if you're in that position, I know exactly where you are. I mean, it feels like yesterday that I was in that position. And even today, I struggle with boredom because my body is so used to being in a stressed state. Like, my body is so used to having problems and being in fight or flight all the time that today, being more successful, I struggle with just sitting back and enjoying, because my body is just so used to working and creating problems, which is another problem in and of itself. I'm not proud of that. But if you're in that situation, what did I do to overcome that? Number one, I pivoted from using my own money for my own deals to using other people's money for my deals. So I used the Burr method, but I also brought partners to my deals where I had the expertise. I found the deals, I did the construction and the property management, and my partner brought any money that was needed for the deal. So even if you're using hard money, you have interest payments, utilities, tax, insurance. Sometimes you go over budget on the construction. And so that was now my partner's liability to come up with the money rather than mine. So that helped a lot, because now I wasn't just dishing all of my savings into real estate. Now I could save and build up as much money as possible to just pay for the existing hard money interest payments that I had and other liabilities that came up. I had property managers that were doing a horrible job. And so there was a lot of out of pocket every single month. I had contractors. There was this one contractor who just completely effed me over. I thought the construction would be as easy as, you hire someone, you pay them the money, and they finish the job. And this one contractor in particular, I almost want to say his name, but I don't know if that's appropriate. I hired him for 5 jobs at a time because he said he could do it. He finished 2 out of the 5. We were wildly over budget on both of them. And he ended up walking away, leaving me with 3 unfinished jobs that I still had to do. And, I had basically spent the budget of all 5 of the jobs. And so that was a nightmare. Make sure you learn construction management and property management if you want to do this business. If you're going to do one a year, you could probably figure it out. But if you want to scale in this business, you 100% have to learn the operations if you want to be successful. That's just a non-negotiable. If I would have known property management and construction management, I probably, instead of creating financial freedom in 5.5 years, it probably would have been 3.5 years, because that really held me back quite a bit. But it also made me into the entrepreneur, real estate investor that I am today. So I'm very grateful for those experiences. But I started to use other people's money. I also got into side hustles. So if my job was commission based, I would have just doubled down on my job and tried to make more money and really focused on the income. I did not have that, so I started serving jobs, side hustles, DoorDash. Like I was a Jimmy John's driver. Like I did everything I could possibly do to just make a little bit more money to survive, basically. So I would recommend doing what you can do to create more income, use other people's money. And then the third thing I would say is I educated myself. I continued to read. I figured out more resourceful ways to do the construction that didn't break my wallet. Simple things, painting the cabinets rather than replacing them and adding hardware. Going with laminate countertops instead of quartz or something like that. I got better at managing the construction too, because part of the problem was I was hiring people who would install flooring incorrectly, for example, and then I had to hire someone else to undo the flooring and redo everything. And so, simple things like that really broke my wallet. So really just learning the business more is going to allow you to be more resourceful and make the most out of the money that you have. So those are the 3 pointers I would give someone. If you're in that position, the fourth thing I would say is know thyself. Is this really for you? Do you really want this stress? I am someone who prefers to take on more today for a better life in the future. There are other people out there who prefer to just have a better day-to-day life, and that's awesome. That's totally fine. I was not that person. But when I overcame the hump of the 17-unit apartment complex, things just got a lot easier. I still had my property manager. The day that I let go of my property manager and really just started to bring everything in-house, that's when my life really changed. My costs were significantly lower. Jobs were getting done more efficiently. Everything just sort of fell into place. And then 5.5 years later, I created financial freedom through real estate. I had 93 units. I was producing roughly $13,000 a month in cash flow. I went through the COVID era, so a lot of those properties had a massive amount of appreciation and rent growth. And those things really helped me out and helped me, create the financial freedom and the equity in the real estate portfolio. So that's my story. I wanted to share that today because I have had quite a few people come up to me and say, "Hey, James, what do you do when you're in this situation of stress? When you're trying to grow your portfolio as quickly as possible." So I remember that like yesterday. Every real estate investor goes through the same thing if they want to build their portfolio aggressively. And I can say from personal experience, it is totally worth it. Do not give up. Keep going. Real estate is such a rewarding business. It's such a forgiving business, especially if you want to do rental properties rather than fix and flips. So it's worth it. I come from a normal family, normal background. I'm a normal dude, not smarter than anyone else. If I could do it, anyone can do it. So thank you for tuning in today, guys, to the 10th episode of the Multifamily Methods Real Estate Podcast. I appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.